The boardroom was silent except for the sound of rain against the glass windows. Leon Hartwell stood frozen, staring at the young woman across from him. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the mahogany table. "You're mine," he whispered, his voice cracking in a way it hadn't in decades. Laura looked at him with eyes that held no warmth, no hope, no longing. Just truth. Cold, undeniable truth. "I was." "Once," she replied, her voice steady as steel. "Before you chose money over my mother. Before you signed the paper that killed her. Before you pretended we never existed." He reached toward her instinctively, then stopped. His arm fell to his side like dead weight. "Liana," he breathed. "Your mother, she was. Everything you threw away," Laura finished. "And now the whole world knows what you did. Years before the betrayal. Years before the cover-up. Years before Laura was born." There was a breathtaking love story. Not forbidden. Not accidental. But impossible. The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers and the chatter of wealthy donors. It was a charity gala for the arts, the kind of event where millionaires wrote checks to feel cultured and heirs showed up because their fathers demanded it. In the corner of the room sat a black grand piano, polished to perfection. And behind it sat Liana Clarke. She was 23 years old, a scholarship student at the conservatory, hired for the evening to provide ambience while the elite sipped champagne and discussed business deals. Her fingers moved across the keys with effortless grace, playing Chopin with the kind of emotion that made people stop talking and actually listen. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair pulled back, no jewelry except for small silver earrings her mother had given her. She didn't need anything else. Her presence was enough. Leon Hartwell was 26, freshly graduated from business school, and already being groomed to take over his father's pharmaceutical empire. He hated these events. The fake smiles. The empty conversations. The way everyone looked at him and saw dollar signs instead of a person. He stood near the bar, nursing a drink he didn't want, nodding politely as an investor droned on about market projections. And then he heard it. The music changed. The melody shifted from background noise to something that demanded attention. It was Rachmaninoff now, technically perfect but filled with something raw. Something real. Leon stopped mid-conversation. He didn't excuse himself. He didn't finish his sentence. He simply walked away, drawn toward the sound like a man following a light in the darkness. He stopped behind the piano, watching her. Liana's eyes were closed as she played, her whole body moving with the music. She wasn't performing. She was feeling. When the piece ended, the room erupted in polite applause. She opened her eyes and found herself looking directly at a tall man in an expensive suit who wasn't clapping. He was just staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That was incredible," Leon said softly. Liana blinked, suddenly aware that someone was standing there. "Thank you," she replied, her fingers already moving to the next piece on her playlist. "No, I mean it," he insisted, moving slightly so she could see him better. "I've been to 100 of these things. Nobody ever plays like that. Like they actually care." She studied him for a moment. He looked like all the others. Perfect haircut. Designer suit. Confidence that came from never worrying about money. But there was something different in his eyes. Something curious. Something almost vulnerable. "I do care," she said simply. "Music is the only honest thing in a room like this." Leon laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even him. "You're not wrong. I'm Leon," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated, then shook it. "Liana." "Just Liana?" he asked with a slight smile. "Just Leon," she countered. He grinned. "Fair enough." Someone called his name from across the room. His father's business partner, beckoning him back to the conversation he'd abandoned. Leon glanced over, then looked back at Liana. "I have to go deal with that," he said reluctantly. "But will you be here all night?" "Until midnight," she replied. "Then I'll be back," he promised. And he was. Between conversations with investors and obligatory greetings to his father's associates, Leon kept finding his way back to the piano. He didn't say much. Sometimes he just stood there, listening. Other times he made small comments that made her smile despite herself. "You take requests?" he asked during one of her breaks. "Depends on the request," she replied, taking a sip of water. "Something happy," he said. "Everything tonight is so serious. I could use something that doesn't feel like work." Liana thought for a moment, then began playing a light, jazzy melody. Something playful and unexpected. Leon's face lit up. "I didn't know classical pianists did jazz," he said. "Classical pianists do whatever makes them feel alive," she replied without looking up from the keys. When midnight came and the event wound down, Leon found himself not wanting to leave. Liana packed up her sheet music slowly, very aware that he was still standing there. "Can I walk you out?" he asked. She should have said no. She knew his type. Rich boys who played with normal girls until reality called them back. But there was something in the way he asked. Not entitled. Not assuming. Just hopeful. "Okay," she said quietly. They walked through the emptying ballroom and out into the cool spring air. The valet brought her old sedan around, and Leon looked at it like he was seeing something foreign. "You drove yourself?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "Not all of us have chauffeurs," she said with a slight smirk. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quickly. Most people I meet don't do anything themselves." "Maybe you're meeting the wrong people," Liana suggested. He smiled. "Maybe I am." There was a pause. The kind that happens when two people don't want to say goodbye but don't know what else to say. "Would you want to get coffee sometime?" Leon asked. "I promise I'm more interesting than I was tonight. These events make me forget how to be a normal person." Liana studied him carefully. Every instinct told her to protect herself. But something else, something quieter, told her to take the chance. "Coffee," she agreed. "Not dinner. Not drinks. Just coffee." "Just coffee," he repeated, smiling like she'd given him something precious. They exchanged numbers. She drove away. And Leon stood in the parking lot long after her taillights disappeared, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The coffee date turned into a walk through the botanical gardens. The walk turned into an afternoon at a used bookstore where Leon was amazed that books could cost less than $50. The bookstore visit turned into late-night conversations at a diner where nobody knew his last name. And slowly, carefully, two people from completely different worlds started building something real. Liana's apartment was small, a fifth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where Leon had never set foot. But it was filled with warmth. Books on every surface. Plants on the windowsill. A keyboard in the corner where she practiced when the conservatory was closed. The first time he visited, he looked around with genuine wonder. "This is amazing," he said. She laughed. "It's 400 square feet and the radiator sounds like it's dying." "It's yours," he said simply. "Everything here is you. My place is just expensive furniture someone else picked out." They sat on her worn couch, drinking cheap wine, and Leon told her things he'd never told anyone. About the pressure of being an heir. About his father's coldness. About board meetings he sat through at 26 where old men talked about human lives like they were profit margins. "I don't want to be him," Leon admitted quietly. "I don't want to become the kind of person who only sees numbers when they look at the world." "Then don't," Liana said, as if it were simple. "It's not that easy," he replied. "There are expectations. Obligations. A legacy I'm supposed to uphold. Or you could build your own legacy, she suggested. One that doesn't require you to lose your soul. He looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. A beautiful one he desperately wanted to learn. You make it sound possible, he whispered. It is possible, she insisted. You just have to want it more than you want their approval. Leon leaned closer. Can I kiss you? Liana's breath caught. She should have thought about it longer. Should have considered the consequences. But in that moment, sitting in her tiny apartment with a man who looked at her like she was the only real thing in his world, she didn't want to be careful. Yes, she breathed. The kiss was soft at first. Tentative. Testing. Then deeper. More certain. When they pulled apart, Leon rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, he admitted. And it terrifies me. Why? She asked. Because everything good in my life eventually gets taken away, he said. Liana cupped his face in her hands. I'm not going anywhere. But she was wrong. She just didn't know it yet. For 6 months, they existed in a bubble. Leon started coming to her place more than his own penthouse. They'd cook dinner together, simple meals that tasted better than anything his private chef made. They'd walk through the city at night, hands intertwined, talking about everything and nothing. He started reading the books she recommended. She started understanding the weight he carried. Tell me about your family, he said one evening as they lay on her couch, her head on his chest. Not much to tell, she replied. My mom raised me alone. She worked 3 jobs to pay for my piano lessons. Died when I was 19. Cancer. Leon's arms tightened around her. I'm sorry. She was everything, Liana continued softly. Strong. Kind. She never made me feel like we were struggling, even when we were. She just wanted me to have opportunities she never had. She'd be so proud of you, Leon said. I hope so, Liana whispered. What about yours? Leon was quiet for a long moment. My father is complicated. He built an empire from nothing, and he believes that makes him infallible. My mother left when I was 10. Couldn't handle the pressure, the coldness, the way he treated people like chess pieces. I don't blame her for leaving. I just wish she'd taken me with her. Is that why you stay? Liana asked. Because you don't want to abandon the company like she abandoned you? Leon had never thought about it that way. Maybe, he admitted. Or maybe I'm just too afraid to find out who I am without all of it. You're Leon, she said simply. The man who stops everything to listen to piano music. Who gets excited about used books. Who laughs at my terrible jokes. Who makes me feel like I matter. That's who you are. He kissed the top of her head. I love you. She turned to look up at him, eyes wide. What? I love you, Liana Clarke, he repeated. I don't care that it's only been 6 months. I don't care that it's terrifying. I love you. Tears filled her eyes. I love you too. They made plans. Quiet, tentative plans for a future they were afraid to say out loud. Maybe Leon would step back from the family business. Maybe they'd move somewhere smaller, quieter. Maybe they'd build something together that wasn't built on his father's foundation. Maybe was a dangerous word. But it was also a hopeful one. Everything changed on a Tuesday. Leon came to her apartment in the middle of the day, which he never did. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. Liana knew immediately something was catastrophically wrong. What happened? She asked, fear gripping her chest. He knows, Leon said flatly. My father knows about us. Okay, Liana said slowly, trying to stay calm. That's not the end of the world. We knew we'd have to tell him eventually. You don't understand, Leon cut her off. He had someone following me. Taking pictures. Building a file. He called me into his office this morning and laid it all out on his desk like evidence in a trial. Liana felt cold. What did he say? Leon ran his hands through his hair, pacing her small living room. He said I was jeopardizing everything. That associating with someone from your background would damage the family reputation. That investors wouldn't trust someone who makes emotional decisions. Someone from my background, Liana repeated, hurt flashing across her face. You mean someone poor? He called you a liability, Leon said, his voice breaking. He said you were probably after the money. That you'd get pregnant and trap me. That I was thinking with everything except my brain. And what did you say? Liana asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Leon looked at her with anguished eyes. I defended you. I told him he was wrong. I told him you were the best thing that ever happened to me. But? Liana prompted, because she could hear it in his voice. But he gave me an ultimatum, Leon finished. Choose you and lose everything. The company. The inheritance. My position on the board. My future. All of it. Or end this now and take my place as his successor. The apartment was silent except for the sound of the radiator clanking. Liana stood very still, waiting. Hoping. Praying he'd say the words she needed to hear. Liana, he started, and she knew. She knew from the way he said her name. From the defeat in his voice. From the fact that he couldn't meet her eyes. Don't, she whispered. Please don't do this. I don't have a choice, he said desperately. If I walk away, I have nothing. No job. No money. No connections. How am I supposed to take care of you with nothing? I don't need you to take care of me, she said, anger rising in her voice. I need you to choose me. To choose us. We'll figure out the rest. It's not that simple, he insisted. It is exactly that simple, she shot back. Either you love me enough to fight for this, or you don't. Either I'm worth more than money, or I'm not. Leon's face crumpled. You are worth more. You're worth everything. But I can't just throw away everything I've worked for. Everything I'm supposed to be. You're supposed to be mine, Liana said, tears streaming down her face now. You're supposed to be the man who said he loved me. The man who made plans with me. The man who promised me we'd build something real. I do love you, he choked out. No, she said firmly. You love the idea of me. You love who you get to be when you're here, playing pretend in my world. But when it costs you something real, when you actually have to sacrifice, you run back to Daddy's empire. That's not fair, Leon protested. None of this is fair, Liana cried. But you're the one making the choice. Not your father. You. So choose. He stood there, torn between two worlds. And in that moment of hesitation, Liana saw her answer. If he loved her the way she loved him, there would be no hesitation. There would be no question. He would choose her instantly and figure out the rest later. But he didn't. And that told her everything. Get out, she said quietly. Liana, please, he begged. Give me time to figure this out. To find another way. There is no other way, she said. And I won't be someone's secret. Someone's compromise. Someone you love when it's convenient. So get out. I'm sorry, he whispered. So am I, she replied, turning away so he wouldn't see her completely fall apart. Leon walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the knob, turned back one last time. I really do love you. Please believe that. If you loved me, Liana said without turning around, you'd still be standing here. The door closed. The footsteps faded. And Liana collapsed on her couch and sobbed for the future that just walked away. Leon didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't show up at her door with some grand gesture or changed mind. He vanished completely, as if their 6 months together had been a dream. Liana tried to hate him. Tried to convince herself he was just another rich man who took what he wanted and discarded what he didn't need. But heartbreak isn't rational. And late at night, she still reached for her phone, hoping to see his name. 3 weeks after he left, Liana woke up feeling nauseous. She assumed it was grief, the physical manifestation of a broken heart. But when it continued for days, a terrible thought occurred to her. She bought a pregnancy test from the drugstore on the corner, her hands shaking as she paid. She took it home. Waited 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. And stared at 2 pink lines that changed everything. She was pregnant. With the child of a man who chose money over her. A man who disappeared without a trace. A man whose father called her a liability. Liana sat on her bathroom floor and tried to figure out what to do. She could call him. Tell him. But what would that accomplish? He'd already made his choice. And she refused to be the woman who trapped him with a pregnancy his father had literally predicted. She thought about other options. Thought about them seriously. But every time she imagined it, she felt her mother's presence. Her mother who worked 3 jobs to give her opportunities. Her mother who loved her fiercely despite the struggle. Her mother who never made her feel like she was a burden. And Liana realized she was already in love with this tiny cluster of cells. Already imagining a future with a child who would be hers completely. She decided to keep it. To raise her baby alone. To never tell Leon. Because if he wanted to be a father, he would have chosen to be in her life. And she wouldn't beg him for something as sacred as parenthood. But first, she tried one more time. Not for herself. For the baby. She called his number. It was disconnected. She sent an email to his old personal account. It bounced back. She even went to Hartwell Global Headquarters, stood in the massive lobby with its marble floors and corporate art, and asked to see Leon Hartwell. The receptionist looked at her like she was insane. Mr. Hartwell doesn't take unsolicited meetings, the woman said coldly. It's personal, Liana insisted. Please. Just tell him Liana Clarke needs to speak with him. The receptionist made a call, spoke quietly, then hung up. Mr. Hartwell's assistant says he doesn't know anyone by that name. If you don't have an appointment, I'll have to ask you to leave. Liana stood there, humiliation burning through her. He'd erased her. Completely. As if she'd never existed. She walked out of that building with her head high and her heart shattered, and she made a vow. She would never come back. She would never ask him for anything again. And if her child ever asked about their father, she'd find a way to explain that some people aren't built for love. They're built for power. And sometimes those 2 things can't coexist. The pregnancy was difficult from the start. Liana's body struggled. She was exhausted constantly, nauseous for months. She had to cut back on performances because she couldn't sit at a piano for hours without feeling faint. Money got tighter. She'd been living modestly before, but adding medical bills to an already strained budget was suffocating. She applied for assistance programs. Swallowed her pride and asked for help from friends. Did everything she could to stay afloat. Around her 5th month, the complications started. High blood pressure. Swelling. Protein in her urine. Her doctor referred her to a specialist who prescribed a new medication to manage the symptoms. It was cutting edge, recently approved, and thankfully covered by her insurance. The doctor assured her it was safe. That thousands of pregnant women had taken it with no adverse effects. That she needed it to protect both herself and the baby. So Liana took it. Every day. trusting that the medical system meant to protect her would do exactly that. She didn't know that the medication was produced by a subsidiary of Hartwell Global. She didn't know that there had been early warning signs during trials that were buried in paperwork. She didn't know that women had started reporting complications, and those reports were being quietly collected and filed away. She didn't know that the man who abandoned her had any connection to the pills she swallowed every morning. She just knew that she felt worse instead of better. That her body was fighting something it couldn't name. That pregnancy, which was supposed to be beautiful, felt like a battle she was losing. When she complained to her doctor, he adjusted the dosage. When she called the pharmaceutical company's hotline, they took her information and promised someone would follow up. No one ever did. When she submitted a formal complaint through the company website, she received an automated response thanking her for her feedback. Her case was assigned a number, filed in a system, and sent up the chain for review. Somewhere in a glass tower in downtown, in an office with a view of the entire city, a young executive named Leon Hartwell reviewed a list of customer complaints as part of his new role overseeing subsidiary operations. It was tedious work. Hundreds of reports. Most of them minor. Some requiring investigation. A few flagged for legal review. And one that made him pause. Patient name: Liana Clarke. Complaint regarding prenatal medication. Adverse symptoms. Request for medical review. He stared at the name. It couldn't be the same person. Clarke was a common name. And Liana was a beautiful name. Probably dozens of women named Liana Clarke in this city alone. He told himself that as he marked the file as reviewed. Told himself that as he moved to the next case. Told himself that as he signed off on the monthly report and sent it to legal. But deep down, in a place he wouldn't acknowledge, he knew. He knew it was her. He knew she needed help. And he did nothing. Because acknowledging her meant acknowledging what he'd done. Meant reopening a wound he'd convinced himself had healed. Meant facing the choice he made and the life he destroyed. So he buried it. The same way his father had taught him to bury anything that threatened the bottom line. He buried Liana's complaint under company protocol and corporate bureaucracy. And he moved on with his day. Liana never received a follow-up call. Never got the medical review she requested. Never knew that the man who broke her heart had seen her cry for help and turned away a second time. On a cold December night, after 12 hours of labor, Laura Clarke Hartwell was born. She was 6 pounds, 4 ounces. Tiny and perfect and screaming with indignation at being forced into the world. When the nurse placed her in Liana's arms, exhausted and overwhelmed and terrified, she looked down at her daughter and felt something shift. This was love. This was purpose. This was what she was fighting for. "Hello, little one," Liana whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your mama. And I'm going to give you everything. I promise." The baby stopped crying, as if she understood. As if she knew that this woman holding her would move mountains to keep that promise. Liana traced her daughter's face with gentle fingers. She had Leon's eyes. His nose. But Liana's mouth. Her determined chin. She was a perfect blend of the two people who created her. One who would love her forever. And one who would never know she existed. The nurse came in with paperwork. Birth certificate information. Legal documentation. "Name?" she asked. Liana had thought about this for months. She could erase Leon completely. Give her daughter only her last name. Pretend he'd never existed. But that felt like lying. Like denying half of who this baby was. So she made a choice. A private one. One that acknowledged truth even if the world would never see it. "Laura Clarke Hartwell," she said clearly. The nurse wrote it down without question. That was the name that went on the official birth certificate. The document Liana would lock away in a box under her bed. The proof that Laura was not just hers, but his. Even if he would never claim her. For the public records, for school enrollment, for everything that mattered in their daily life, she was Laura Clarke. Just Clarke. But in her heart, in her identity, in the truth of her existence, she was a Hartwell. And someday, Liana thought as she held her sleeping daughter, someday Laura would decide for herself what that meant. The first years were beautiful chaos. Sleepless nights and tiny fingers wrapped around hers. First smiles and first steps. Liana loved her with a fierceness that surprised even her. She worked as much as she could, piecing together income from piano lessons and small performances. They lived simply. Second-hand clothes and budget groceries. But they were happy. Laura was a bright, curious child. She loved music as much as her mother. By age 3, she was picking out melodies on the keyboard. By 5, she was reading above grade level. By 7, she was asking questions about everything. "Mama, why don't I have a daddy?" Laura asked one evening as Liana tucked her into bed. Liana's breath caught. She'd prepared for this question but never felt ready for it. "You do have a daddy," she said carefully. "He just couldn't be with us." "Why not?" Laura pressed, her young face serious. "Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people they love," Liana explained. "Your daddy had to make a very difficult choice, and he chose something else. But that doesn't mean you're not loved. You are so loved." "Do I look like him?" Laura asked. Liana smiled sadly. "You have his eyes. And his intelligence. And his stubborn streak. Is he a good person?" That question broke Liana's heart. Because she didn't know how to answer honestly without poisoning her daughter against someone she might never meet. "I think he's a complicated person," she said finally. "I think he was good once. And maybe he still is, in ways I can't see anymore." Laura seemed to accept this. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Will I ever meet him?" "I don't know, sweetheart," Liana said honestly. "But whether you do or not, you're going to be extraordinary. Because you're you. Not because of him or me. Just you." Laura nodded and closed her eyes. Liana kissed her forehead and left the room, then went to her own bedroom and cried for all the things her daughter would never have. A father at her school plays. Someone to teach her to ride a bike. A name she could say with pride instead of curiosity. Leon had taken so much from them. But she wouldn't let his absence define their life. But Liana's health was deteriorating. The medication she'd taken during pregnancy had done damage she didn't fully understand. Her energy was depleted. She caught every illness that went around. Her immune system seemed to be attacking itself. Doctors ran tests but couldn't pinpoint a cause. They talked about autoimmune conditions and chronic fatigue and a dozen other possibilities. They never connected it to the pills she'd taken years ago. Never thought to ask about her pregnancy. Never looked at the growing number of women who'd taken the same medication and were experiencing similar symptoms. By the time Laura was 10, Liana could barely work. She'd gone from teaching 15 piano students a week to 5. From performing at events to canceling more gigs than she accepted. The bills piled up. They moved to a smaller apartment. Then a smaller one. Laura started noticing. Started understanding that something was wrong with her mother beyond just being tired. "Mama, are you sick?" she asked one day after school, finding Liana still in bed at 3 in the afternoon. "Just having a bad day, baby," Liana said, trying to smile. "I'll be better tomorrow." But tomorrow came and she wasn't better. And the day after that. And the month after that. Laura became a caretaker without anyone teaching her how. She learned to make simple meals. To do laundry. To manage the household in ways no 10-year-old should have to. She never complained. Never resented it. She just loved her mother and did what needed to be done. "You're such a good girl," Liana would tell her, tears in her eyes. "You shouldn't have to do this." "I don't mind," Laura would reply, sitting on the edge of her mother's bed. "We're a team." But Liana minded. She minded desperately. She'd wanted to give her daughter the world, and instead she was taking childhood away from her. The guilt ate at her almost as much as the illness. She tried to get better. Tried new doctors, new treatments, new specialists when she could afford them. Nothing helped. Something fundamental was broken in her body, and no one could fix it. When Laura was 12, Liana was hospitalized. Acute kidney failure. The doctors worked frantically to stabilize her. They asked about her medical history. About medications she'd taken. About any exposure to toxins. Liana told them everything she could remember, including the prenatal medication. A young resident's face changed when she mentioned the name. "That drug was recalled," he said carefully. "About 2 years ago. There were reports of long-term complications in women who took it during pregnancy." Liana stared at him. "Recalled?" "Yes," he confirmed. The pharmaceutical company fought it for years, but eventually the evidence was overwhelming. Kidney damage. Autoimmune disorders. Several deaths. "I filed a complaint," Liana said, her voice hollow. "Years ago. When I was pregnant. Nobody ever followed up." The resident looked uncomfortable. "The company has been accused of suppressing early warning signs. There are class action lawsuits pending. You might be eligible to join." But Liana was too tired to fight corporations. Too sick to chase justice. Too focused on staying alive for her daughter. "Just help me get better," she whispered. "Please." They tried. They really did. But the damage was too extensive. Too many years of untreated complications. Too much scarring in her kidneys. Too much strain on her heart. Liana went home after 2 weeks in the hospital, but everyone knew she wouldn't go back to work. Wouldn't recover. Wouldn't grow old watching her daughter grow up. Laura knew too. She was 12, but she understood death. Understood that her mother was dying. That the woman who'd sacrificed everything for her was being taken away by something neither of them could control. She became fierce in her caregiving. Protective. Determined to make every moment count. They talked more in those final months than they had in years. Real conversations. About life and dreams and regrets. Liana told her daughter about the piano. About music. About finding joy in small things. About being kind but not letting people take advantage of that kindness. About being strong but not hard. About loving carefully because love could be the most beautiful and most devastating thing in the world. "Do you regret him?" Laura asked one evening as they sat together, Liana's head in her daughter's lap. "My father. Do you regret loving him?" Liana thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," she said finally. "I regret how it ended. I regret his choices. But I don't regret loving him. Because that love gave me you. And you're the best thing I ever did." "Tell me about him," Laura said. "Really tell me. Not the careful version. The truth." So Liana did. She told her about meeting Leon at the gala. About their secret romance. About how he made her feel like the center of his universe. About his warmth and his dreams and the way he looked at her like she was magic. About his father's ultimatum. About the choice he made. About how he disappeared completely. About the complaint she filed that nobody answered. She didn't tell her daughter his full name. Didn't tell her about the company. Didn't want Laura to carry that burden while she was still so young. He was weak, Laura said when the story was finished. He loved his money more than you. He was human, Liana corrected gently. Flawed and scared and trapped by expectations he didn't know how to escape. I'm angry at him. I probably always will be. But I also understand that people are complicated. And sometimes they make terrible choices that they have to live with forever. Do you think he ever thinks about us? Laura asked. I don't know, Liana admitted. Maybe. Or maybe he convinced himself we never existed. Either way, it doesn't change our life. We've built something beautiful, you and me. Just the two of us. That's enough. But it wasn't enough time. It would never be enough time. Liana died on a Tuesday morning in early spring. Laura was at school. She'd begged to stay home, but Liana had insisted she go, try to maintain some normalcy. When the school office called her down at 10:30, Laura already knew. She knew from the principal's face. From the social worker waiting in the office. From the way everything felt suddenly hollow. I'm so sorry, sweetie, the principal said gently. Your mother passed away this morning. The hospice nurse was with her. She wasn't alone. But she was alone, Laura thought. Because I wasn't there. Because her 12-year-old daughter was in math class while she took her last breath. The guilt was crushing. The grief was worse. And the fear was paralyzing. Because Laura had no other family. No father who'd claimed her. No grandparents. No aunts or uncles waiting in the wings. She was truly, completely alone. Social services placed her in emergency foster care while they tried to locate next of kin. Laura sat in a stranger's house, sleeping in a stranger's bed, and felt like a ghost. At the funeral, paid for by a fund the conservatory had set up, Laura stood beside her mother's casket and made a promise. She didn't know what the promise was yet. Just that her mother's death meant something. That it couldn't just be a tragedy that disappeared into statistics. That somehow, someday, she would make it matter. After the funeral, she was allowed to go back to the apartment one final time to collect her belongings. Everything else would be sold or donated to pay off her mother's debts. Laura moved through the small space like she was underwater. She packed her clothes mechanically. Her books. Her keyboard. And then she went to her mother's bedroom. She'd avoided it until now. Couldn't bear to see the bed where Liana had spent her final months. The nightstand with medications that didn't work. The window she'd stared out of when the pain was too much to sleep. But there was something she needed. Something her mother had mentioned once, years ago, when Laura had asked if she had any pictures of her father. I keep some things, Liana had said carefully. In a box. Under my bed. Someday, when you're old enough, I'll show you. Laura knelt beside the bed and reached underneath. Her fingers found a wooden box, dusty and forgotten. She pulled it out and sat cross-legged on the floor, her heart pounding. This was it. The truth her mother had protected her from. The pieces of a story she only knew in fragments. She opened the box slowly. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. Addressed to Leon Hartwell at addresses Laura didn't recognize. None of them opened. All of them returned or never sent. There were photographs. A young version of her mother smiling up at a handsome man in an expensive suit. The two of them at a bookstore. In a park. In what looked like a tiny apartment. The man had Laura's eyes. Her nose. Her smile when it was genuine and unguarded. There were sonograms. The fuzzy images from prenatal appointments. And on the back of one, written in her mother's handwriting, your daughter. Whether you want to know her or not. There were medical documents. The complaint Liana had filed. The medication information. Hospital records. All of it carefully organized as if she'd been building a case but never had the strength to pursue it. And at the bottom, in an envelope marked, "For Laura," was a letter in her mother's handwriting. Dated just 2 months before she died. Laura's hands shook as she unfolded it. "My darling girl. If you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. Sorry I couldn't stay longer. Sorry I couldn't give you more. Sorry that you have to face the world without me. But I need you to know some things. Things I should have told you sooner but was too afraid or too proud or too hurt to share. Your father's name is Leon Hartwell. He's the CEO of Hartwell Global, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. When I met him, he was kind. Gentle. Real. But when his father made him choose between his inheritance and me, he chose the empire. I've been angry about that for a long time. But as I'm dying, I realize anger takes too much energy I don't have. What I can't forgive is what came after. I tried to tell him about you. He blocked me. I filed a complaint about the medication that's killing me now. A medication his company made. He reviewed my case. And he did nothing. That's not speculation, Laura. I hired a lawyer briefly, before I got too sick. He got access to some internal documents. Your father saw my complaint. He knew I was suffering. And he buried it. I didn't tell you this to make you hate him. I tell you this because you deserve the truth. You deserve to know where you come from and why your life has been so hard. You deserve to decide for yourself what his name means to you. Your birth certificate is in this box. Your real one. Laura Clarke Hartwell. That's who you are legally. I kept it secret to protect you. But now that I'm gone, you get to choose what to do with that truth. You're so much stronger than I ever was. So much smarter. So much braver. Whatever you decide to do with this information, I trust you. And I'm proud of you. Not because of what you'll accomplish or who you'll become. But because of who you already are. A girl who took care of her dying mother without complaint. A girl who finds joy even in struggle. A girl who loves with her whole heart even though she's seen how badly love can hurt. You're going to do extraordinary things, Laura. I won't be there to see them. But I'll be watching somehow. I'll be so proud. I love you forever. Mama. Laura read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it back in the box. She looked at the photographs again. At the medical documents. At the birth certificate that proved she was a Hartwell whether her father acknowledged it or not. And something cold and determined settled in her chest. Her mother had been too kind. Too forgiving. Too willing to let things go because she didn't have the energy to fight. But Laura wasn't dying. Laura was 12 years old with nothing to lose and a rage that had been building her entire life without her even realizing it. Her father had abandoned them twice. Once when he left her mother. And again when he let her die. And someone needed to answer for that. Not now. She was too young. Too powerless. Too alone. But someday. Someday she would walk into Leon Hartwell's empire and make him see what his choices cost. Make him acknowledge the daughter he pretended didn't exist. Make him answer for every ignored plea, every buried complaint, every life his company destroyed in the name of profit. She didn't know how yet. But she would figure it out. Because that's what her mother had taught her. To be smart. To be patient. To be fierce when it mattered. And this mattered more than anything ever would. Laura carefully packed the box with her other belongings. She went to her new foster home. She went through the motions of being a grieving child while social services tried to figure out her long-term placement. And she started planning. 5 years passed. Laura moved through 3 different foster homes. None of them were terrible. None of them were home. She kept her head down, got straight A's, and spent every free moment researching Hartwell Global. She learned everything. The company's history. Its subsidiaries. Its scandals and lawsuits. The drug that killed her mother had been recalled, but the company had settled all the class action suits quietly. No admission of guilt. No criminal charges. Just money paid to make problems disappear. Leon Hartwell had given speeches about corporate responsibility and ethical business practices. He'd been featured in magazines as a visionary leader. He'd married someone appropriate. Had no other children. Built his empire into something powerful and untouchable. Laura hated him with a clarity that scared her sometimes. But she also understood him. He was a coward who chose safety over love. And cowards could be manipulated. Exposed. Destroyed. She just had to be patient. She just had to wait until she was old enough, smart enough, positioned correctly to strike. At 17, she applied to colleges. She got into several with full scholarships based on academic merit and her status as a foster youth. She chose business school. Studied finance and corporate law. Learned how companies operated from the inside. How they hid information. How they protected themselves legally. How they made decisions that impacted thousands of lives without ever meeting the people affected. She was brilliant. Everyone said so. Her professors. Her peers. The companies that recruited her for internships. She could have gone anywhere. Worked for anyone. But there was only one place she wanted to be. At 18, she legally changed her documentation. She'd been Laura Clarke in every official record since foster care. But now she made it permanent. She filed paperwork to remove Hartwell from her birth certificate entirely. Not because she wanted to erase that part of herself. But because she needed to disappear. To become someone her father wouldn't recognize. Someone who could walk into his building and be invisible. She spent months perfecting her application to Hartwell Global. Her resume was flawless. Her grades impeccable. Her recommendations glowing. She wrote essays about her passion for ethical pharmaceutical practices, about wanting to help companies balance profit with social responsibility, about believing in corporate transparency. Every word was true. And every word was a lie. Because her real passion was justice. Her real goal was exposure. Her real belief was that some people needed to be held accountable. She submitted her application for the analyst training program. 6 weeks later, she got the call. She'd been accepted. Of over 5,000 applicants, she was one of 30 selected. She would start in September, 3 months after her 20th birthday. She would work directly with senior executives. She would have access to systems and files and the inner workings of a company her father had built into a fortress. And nobody would know who she really was. The night before she started, Laura stood in front of her mirror in her tiny apartment. She'd gotten through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. She'd saved every penny for this moment. For the professional wardrobe she needed. For the first and last month's rent near the Hartwell Global headquarters. For the computer and phone she'd need to document everything she found. She looked at her reflection. 20 years old. Her mother's dark hair and fierce eyes. Her father's sharp cheekbones and determined jaw. A combination of the two people who created her. One who loved her until her last breath. One who never acknowledged her first. She thought about her mother. About the box still hidden under her bed. About the promise she'd made at 12 years old. "I'm ready, Mama," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm going to make him see. I'm going to make everyone see." The next morning, Laura Clarke walked through the glass doors of Hartwell Global for the first time. The lobby was massive. Marble floors. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A reception desk that looked like it cost more than her entire year's rent. And on the wall behind it, etched in silver letters 3 feet high, Hartwell Global. Innovation. Integrity. Impact. Laura stared at those words. Integrity. The company that buried complaints. That ignored dying women. That paid settlements to avoid admitting guilt. That was built on the broken bodies of people like her mother. And her father stood at the top of it, preaching about ethical leadership. "Can I help you?" the receptionist asked, pulling Laura from her thoughts. "Yes," Laura said with a professional smile. "I'm here for the analyst training program." First day. Name. Laura Clarke. The receptionist checked her computer. Perfect. You're all set. Take the elevator to the 15th floor. Someone from HR will meet you there. Welcome to Hartwell Global. Thank you, Laura replied, her voice steady even as her heart pounded. She walked to the elevator. Pressed the button. Waited. The doors opened and she stepped inside. As they closed, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the polished steel. She looked calm. Confident. Professional. Nobody looking at her would know she was terrified. That she was angry. That she was on a mission that could destroy her if she failed. The elevator rose. Floor by floor. Taking her deeper into the empire built on her mother's grave. When the doors opened on 15, a woman in a crisp suit smiled at her. Laura Clarke. Yes. I'm Jennifer, from HR, welcome. We're so excited to have you. Let me show you around. Laura followed her through open concept offices, conference rooms with views of the city, break rooms with expensive coffee machines. Jennifer chatted about company culture and benefits and opportunities for growth. Laura nodded and smiled and asked appropriate questions. And the whole time, she was thinking, this is it. I'm in. Now comes the hard part. The first few weeks were orientation. Learning company systems. Meeting other analysts. Sitting through presentations about Hartwell Global's history and values. Laura absorbed everything. Took notes. Asked intelligent questions. Made herself useful and memorable for the right reasons. She was friendly but not too friendly. Professional but approachable. Smart but not threatening. And then she saw him. Leon Hartwell came to speak to the new analysts during week 3. He walked into the conference room like he owned it. Which he did. But it was more than that. He commanded space. Commanded attention. He was 52 now. Older than in the photographs. Gray at his temples. Lines around his eyes. But still handsome. Still powerful. Still every inch the billionaire CEO who chose his empire over love. Laura's hands gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles turned white. This was her father. The man whose DNA she carried. Whose eyes she saw in the mirror every morning. Who reviewed her mother's complaint and did nothing. Who let the woman who loved him die alone and poor and forgotten. He started his presentation. Talking about innovation and leadership and the responsibility they had as the next generation of Hartwell Global employees. His voice was smooth. Practiced. The voice of someone who gave speeches for a living. Laura forced herself to breathe. To stay calm. To not stand up and scream at him. Our company was built on a simple principle, Leon said, his eyes scanning the room. Do what's right. Not what's easy. Not what's profitable. What's right. That means making hard choices. That means prioritizing people over profit when it matters. That means being transparent, accountable, and ethical in everything we do. Laura wanted to laugh. Or cry. Or throw something. The hypocrisy was stunning. But she just sat there, taking notes like everyone else, while her father preached about values he'd never lived up to. His eyes passed over her briefly. No recognition. No pause. No flicker of familiarity. Why would there be? He didn't know what she looked like. Didn't know she existed in any meaningful way. She was just another young analyst. Another ambitious nobody trying to climb the corporate ladder. She was invisible to him. And that invisibility was her greatest weapon. After the presentation, there was a brief Q&A. People asked about career paths and company strategy. Laura raised her hand. Leon pointed to her. Yes. You mentioned prioritizing people over profit, Laura said, keeping her voice neutral. Can you give a specific example of a time Hartwell Global chose to do something that hurt the bottom line but was the right thing to do? Leon smiled. Like he appreciated the question. Great question. A few years ago, we discovered a quality issue with one of our generic medications. Not a safety issue. Just a potency variance that was within legal limits but below our standards. We voluntarily recalled every batch, even though we weren't required to. Cost us $40 million. But it was the right thing to do. Laura nodded. Wrote that down. And thought, what about the women who died? What about the complaints you buried? What about choosing the right thing when it actually costs you something personal? But she just smiled politely and said, thank you. The presentation ended. Leon left. And Laura sat very still, processing the fact that she'd just had her first conversation with her father. He'd looked right at her. Spoken to her. And had no idea who she was. The power of that realization was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. After work, she went home and pulled out the box. Looked at the photographs of young Leon and her mother. Tried to see traces of the man who gave that presentation in the boy who looked at Liana like she was his whole world. She couldn't find him. Maybe he didn't exist anymore. Maybe he'd buried that version of himself so deep even he'd forgotten. Or maybe he'd never been real. Maybe her mother had loved an illusion. A performance. Maybe the real Leon Hartwell had always been the man in the suit. The CEO. The person who chose power over everything else. It didn't matter anymore. Whatever he'd been, whatever he might have been, this was who he was now. And Laura was going to expose every crack in his carefully constructed empire. She threw herself into work. Staying late. Volunteering for extra projects. Making herself indispensable. Within 3 months, she was reassigned from general analyst work to a special project team reviewing subsidiary operations. It was perfect. Exactly where she needed to be. Because subsidiary operations meant reviewing compliance reports, customer complaints, and quality control issues across all of Hartwell Global's smaller companies. Including the one that had produced the drug that killed her mother. She worked carefully. Methodically. She couldn't just access her mother's file directly. That would raise red flags. Instead, she built a pattern. She requested access to historical complaint databases to analyze trends. She cross-referenced recall data with customer feedback. She created reports on long-term safety monitoring that required pulling archived records. And slowly, piece by piece, she found what she needed. The original trial data showing early warnings about the prenatal medication. The internal memos discussing whether to pursue full approval or pull the drug. The cost-benefit analysis that decided potential profit outweighed potential risk. The complaints that came in after approval. Hundreds of them. All filed, categorized, and quietly buried. Including one from Liana Clarke. Case number 78416. Filed. Reviewed. Assigned to legal department for assessment. And then noted as resolved with no action required. Resolved. Her mother's death was resolved with a single line in a database. Laura printed everything. Saved everything to encrypted external drives. Built a comprehensive dossier that tracked the entire timeline from development to recall. And at every major decision point, she found signatures. Department heads. Legal counsel. Medical advisors. And on the quarterly executive review that included her mother's complaint specifically, L. Hartwell, CEO. He'd seen it. He'd known. And he'd done nothing. Laura had her proof. But she needed more than documents. She needed context. Understanding. Testimony from others. So she started building relationships. Slowly. Carefully. She befriended other analysts. Got invited to happy hours. Listened to people complain about management decisions. About shortcuts taken. About the ways the company prioritized shareholders over patients. She documented everything. Recorded conversations with consent when she could. Took detailed notes when she couldn't. And then she met Caleb Rowan. He was 28. The youngest senior director in company history. Brilliant and ambitious. He'd been hired 5 years ago out of grad school and promoted rapidly because he was exactly what Leon Hartwell was looking for, someone who thought like him, someone who could take over the empire eventually, someone who could carry the legacy forward. He was being groomed as the heir apparent. Laura hated him on sight. He represented everything wrong with corporate culture. The way talent and intelligence got weaponized for profit instead of progress. The way smart people convinced themselves they were doing good while participating in systems that caused harm. He was a younger version of her father. And that made him dangerous. But he noticed her. In meetings, he'd ask for her input. On projects, he'd seek her analysis. He started staying late when she stayed late. Started bringing her coffee when he got his own. Started having conversations that went beyond work. "You're different from the others," he said one evening as they both worked past midnight on a regulatory filing. "Different how?" Laura asked, not looking up from her computer. "You care," he said. "Not just about the work. About what it means. Most people here just want to climb the ladder. You actually want to make sure we're doing things right." Laura looked at him. Really looked. He seemed genuine. But she didn't trust genuine. "Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" "Supposed to and actually doing are different things," Caleb replied. "I've been here 5 years. I've seen a lot of people come through. Most of them are just checking boxes. You're trying to understand why the boxes exist." "Maybe I'm just thorough," Laura suggested. "Maybe," he agreed. "Or maybe you've seen what happens when companies cut corners. When they prioritize profit over people. When they forget that behind every complaint number is an actual human being." His words hit too close. Laura's chest tightened. "Why do you think that?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Because I recognize it. My sister died from a medication error when I was in college. Wrong dosage. Simple mistake. But it killed her. That's why I went into pharmaceutical regulation. Why I took this job. I thought I could change things from the inside." Laura's entire worldview shifted. "Did you? Change things?" "I don't know," he admitted. "Some days I think I'm making a difference. Other days I think I'm just another cog in a machine that doesn't actually care." "What about you? Why are you here?" This was dangerous territory. Laura could feel it. But something about his honesty demanded honesty in return. "I'm here because this company destroyed someone I loved. And I want to make sure it never happens again." Caleb studied her face. "Who did we destroy?" "My mother," Laura said quietly. "She took one of our drugs. She filed complaints. Nobody listened. She died. And I'm here to make sure that story doesn't stay buried. She expected him to defend the company. To report her. To protect his position. Instead, he just nodded slowly. What do you need? What? Laura said, surprised. To make sure her story doesn't stay buried, Caleb clarified. What do you need? I need evidence that can't be dismissed, Laura said. I need proof that people at the highest levels knew there were problems and chose to ignore them. I need to connect all the dots in a way that even our legal team can't bury. I can help with that, Caleb said simply. Why would you? Laura asked, suspicious. You're being groomed to run this company someday. Why would you help me expose its failures? Because my sister deserved better, he said. And so did your mother. And if this company is going to mean anything, it has to be willing to face its mistakes. Otherwise, we're just another corporation that values money over human life. And I didn't spend 7 years of education and 5 years here to be part of that. Laura wanted to believe him. Wanted to trust that he was genuine. But trust had been beaten out of her through years of disappointment. How do I know you won't just report me to Leon? You don't, Caleb admitted. But I'm asking you to take a chance. The same way I'm taking a chance telling you I'll help. We can do this together, or we can both keep fighting alone. Your choice. Laura looked at him for a long time. Weighing options. Calculating risks. And then she made a decision that would change everything. Okay. But if you betray me, I'll make sure your name is on every document right next to his. Caleb smiled slightly. Fair enough. They became partners. Secret ones. During the day, they were professional colleagues. After hours, they were investigators. Caleb had access to executive files Laura couldn't reach. She had analysis skills and attention to detail he didn't. Together, they started piecing together a complete picture of negligence, cover-ups, and corporate malfeasance that spanned over a decade. They worked late nights. Sometimes at the office. Sometimes at her apartment. Sometimes at his. They ordered takeout and pored over documents and built timelines and connected names to decisions. And somewhere in those long nights, something shifted between them. It wasn't intentional. Wasn't planned. But pain recognizes gentleness. And brokenness recognizes safety. Laura found herself laughing at his jokes. Looking forward to seeing him. Feeling less alone than she had since her mother died. And Caleb found himself drawn to her intensity, her intelligence, her fierce determination to make things right. They didn't talk about it. Didn't acknowledge the way their hands would brush when passing documents. The way their eyes would meet and hold longer than necessary. The way being together felt like coming home. One night, 3 months into their secret partnership, they were at her apartment reviewing financial records. It was past 2 in the morning. They were both exhausted. Laura's eyes were burning from staring at spreadsheets. She rubbed her face and sighed. We should stop, Caleb said gently. We're not going to find anything new tonight. We're too tired. Just one more file, Laura insisted. Laura, he said, and there was something in his voice that made her look up. You're allowed to rest. Your mother wouldn't want you to destroy yourself trying to get justice for her. Tears filled her eyes suddenly, unexpectedly. You don't know what she'd want. I know she loved you, Caleb said softly, moving closer. And people who love us want us to be okay. To have lives beyond our pain. To find moments of peace. I don't deserve peace, Laura whispered. Not while he's still up there pretending to be a good man. Not while people still believe his lies. You deserve everything, Caleb insisted. You deserve rest and happiness and a future that's about more than revenge. It's not revenge, she said, but her voice cracked. It's justice. It can be both, he acknowledged. But it doesn't have to consume you. Laura broke down then. Really broke down. All the grief she'd been holding since she was 12. All the anger she'd cultivated for 8 years. All the exhaustion of pretending to be someone she wasn't for months. She sobbed, and Caleb pulled her into his arms and held her while she shattered. I miss her so much, Laura cried into his shoulder. Every day. And I'm so angry that she's gone. That he gets to live this perfect life while she's dead. That nothing I do will bring her back. I know, Caleb murmured, running his hand through her hair. I know. They stayed like that for a long time. When Laura finally pulled back, her eyes were red and swollen. She tried to apologize, but Caleb stopped her. Don't, he said. You don't have to be strong all the time. Not with me. She looked up at him. Really looked. At the genuine care in his eyes. At the way he held her like she was precious instead of broken. At the way he made her feel seen in a way nobody had since her mother died. And before she could talk herself out of it, she kissed him. It was soft at first. Hesitant. Testing. Caleb froze for just a second, then kissed her back. Gentle but certain. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. We shouldn't, Laura started. Probably not, Caleb agreed. It's complicated. Definitely complicated. We're working together on something that could destroy both our careers. Very true. So we should stop. We should. Neither of them moved. They just looked at each other. And then Caleb smiled. Or we could acknowledge that life is short and uncertain and sometimes the best things happen in the middle of complicated situations. Laura laughed despite herself. Is that your way of saying you want to kiss me again? That depends, he said. Do you want me to? Yes, she admitted. Which is probably a terrible idea. Probably, he agreed. But I'm going to do it anyway. And he did. And this time it wasn't hesitant. It was real and warm and full of all the things they hadn't said out loud. When they finally broke apart, Laura rested her forehead against his. This doesn't change the mission, she said quietly. I know, Caleb replied. Even if it means bringing down your mentor. Your company. Your career. I know, he repeated. I'm in this with you. All the way. They worked faster after that. More focused. With a deadline looming that neither wanted to acknowledge. Because once they exposed Hartwell Global, once the truth came out, everything would change. Their careers would implode. They might face legal battles. And their relationship, fragile and new, would be tested in ways they couldn't predict. But they kept going. 5 months after Laura started at Hartwell Global, they had everything. Every document. Every signature. Every buried complaint. Every financial record showing the company knew about problems and chose profit over safety. Every connection between executive decisions and patient deaths. And at the center of it all, like a spider in a web he'd carefully constructed, was Leon Hartwell. This is it, Laura said, looking at the complete dossier they'd assembled. This is enough to bring federal investigators. To force accountability. To make sure everyone knows what this company really is. Are you sure? Caleb asked. Once we do this, there's no going back. Your father will know who you are. What you've done. He'll know his daughter was the one who destroyed him. Laura thought about that. About the revelation. About seeing recognition finally dawn in Leon Hartwell's eyes. About him understanding that the woman he abandoned came back and dismantled everything he built. There was a part of her that wanted that confrontation. That needed him to know. But there was another part, smaller but persistent, that wondered if he'd care. If knowing would matter to a man who'd spent 20 years pretending she didn't exist. He's not my father, Laura said firmly. He's a sperm donor who happened to love my mother once. Real fathers show up. Real fathers fight for their children. Real fathers don't review complaints from women they got pregnant and mark them resolved. Caleb took her hand. Okay. Then let's do this. How do you want to play it? They decided on multiple approaches. Submit the dossier to federal investigators anonymously. Send copies to major news outlets with a press release revealing Laura's identity and connection to the case. File formal complaints with the board of directors and major shareholders. Create a comprehensive website documenting everything in a format the public could access. And time it all for maximum impact. Hartwell Global was celebrating its 30th anniversary with a massive gala. A black tie event with investors, politicians, and media coverage. Leon Hartwell would give a speech about the company's legacy and future. It was meant to be a celebration of everything he'd built. Instead, Laura and Caleb decided it would be the day his empire started crumbling. They worked frantically for 2 weeks. Coordinating releases. Confirming sources. Making sure every piece of evidence was verified and unassailable. They barely slept. Lived on coffee and adrenaline and the knowledge that they were about to change everything. The night before the gala, Caleb stayed at Laura's apartment. They sat on her couch, the final submission package ready to go. One click would start the avalanche. Laura's finger hovered over the send button. Last chance to back out, she said, not meaning it. I'm not backing out, Caleb replied. Are you? No, Laura said. But I'm terrified. Me too, he admitted. But we're doing the right thing. The right thing ruins lives, Laura pointed out. The right thing saves lives, Caleb countered. Think about how many people this company hurt. How many more they'll hurt if nothing changes. Your mother deserved better. My sister deserved better. Every patient who trusted Hartwell Global deserved better. This is how we make sure they get it. Laura nodded. Took a deep breath. And clicked send. The dossier went to federal investigators. To journalists at 5 major news organizations. To board members. To regulatory agencies. To advocacy groups. Within hours, it would be everywhere. By morning, the world would know. And there would be no stopping it. They didn't sleep that night. Just held each other and waited for dawn. When the sun rose, Laura checked her phone. 3 missed calls from unknown numbers. 17 emails from journalists. And 1 text from a number she didn't recognize, we need to talk. LH. Leon Hartwell knew. Of course he knew. The board would have called him immediately. Given him a heads up before the story broke publicly. Laura stared at the text. Her father's initials. The first direct communication she'd ever received from him. And it was because she destroyed him. What are you going to do? Caleb asked, reading over her shoulder. I don't know, Laura admitted. Part of me wants to ignore him. Let him wonder. Let him hurt the way my mother hurt when he ghosted her. But part of me wants to see his face. Wants him to look at me and know exactly who I am and what he did. Then do it, Caleb said. Whatever you need. I'm with you. Laura texted back, Hartwell Global Headquarters. Noon. Just you and me. No lawyers. No security. Just us. The response came immediately, agreed. By 8 that morning, the story had exploded. Every major news outlet was covering it. Pharmaceutical giant Hartwell Global under federal investigation. Whistleblower exposes decades of negligence. CEO's secret daughter brings down billion-dollar empire. The details spread like wildfire. Liana's story. Laura's identity. The buried complaints. The executive signatures. The cover-ups. All of it laid bare for the world to see. Laura's phone wouldn't stop ringing. She turned it off. Caleb did the same. They got ready in silence. Professional clothes. War uniforms. This wasn't just a meeting with her father. This was the confrontation that would define both their lives. At 11:30, they took a car to Hartwell Global Headquarters. The building that had represented everything for so long. Power. Corruption. Her father's legacy. Her mother's death. The place where she'd walked in invisible and was about to walk out vindicated. The lobby was chaos. Reporters outside. Security guards blocking access. Employees looking shell-shocked. When Laura walked through the doors, people recognized her. Whispers started. Phones came out. She kept her head high and walked straight to the elevator. Caleb beside her. A security guard tried to stop them, but someone called from across the lobby. Let them through. It was Leon's assistant. She looked shaken but professional. She escorted them to the top floor. To the executive suite. To the massive corner office where Leon Hartwell had ruled his empire for 2 decades. She opened the door and then left, closing it behind them. Leon stood at the window, his back to them, looking out at the city. He didn't turn immediately. Just stood there, processing. When he finally faced them, Laura saw that he looked older. Tired. There were bags under his eyes. His perfect composure cracked at the edges. Laura, he said quietly. Testing the name. Hearing it for the first time from his own mouth. Mr. Hartwell, she replied, her voice steady. He looked at Caleb. You betrayed me. No, Caleb said firmly. I chose what was right over what was easy. The same thing you claim to value but never actually do. Leon flinched. His eyes moved back to Laura. Really seeing her now. You look like her. Like Liana. I know, Laura said. I have your eyes. Your nose. Her heart. Your last name. Though I'm sure you'd rather pretend I don't. I didn't know, Leon said desperately. About you. She never told me. She tried, Laura cut him off. She called. You disconnected your number. She emailed. You blocked her. She came to this building. Your assistant said you didn't know anyone by that name. She tried everything. And you made sure she couldn't reach you. That was my father, Leon insisted. He controlled my communications. He made sure she couldn't contact me. I didn't know. But you knew when she filed a complaint, Laura said coldly. You reviewed her case. You saw her name. You saw that she was dying from your company's medication. And you marked it resolved with no action required. Leon's face went white. You can't know that. I have the documents, Laura said. Your signature. Your initials. Your decision. You killed her just as surely as if you'd given her the poison yourself. I didn't understand, Leon choked out. I saw the name. I thought maybe it was her. But I convinced myself it was just coincidence. I couldn't face the idea that she might need me and I'd ignored her again. So I told myself it was someone else. That Liana wouldn't have used her real name. That it couldn't be the woman I loved. Loved? Laura repeated, her voice sharp. You didn't love her. You loved the idea of her. You loved who you got to be when you were with her. But the moment it cost you something real, you threw her away like garbage. That's not love. That's selfishness. I was weak, Leon admitted, tears in his eyes now. I was scared and weak and I made the worst choice of my life. I've thought about her every day for 20 years. Wondered where she was. If she was happy. If she ever forgave me. She's dead, Laura said flatly. She died when I was 12. Alone in a hospice bed. Because the medication your company made destroyed her body. Because you ignored her pleas for help. Because you chose this empire over her life. So no, she never forgave you. How could she? You never gave her the chance. Leon collapsed into his chair. Really collapsed. Like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. I have a daughter, he whispered. A child I never knew. You have nothing, Laura corrected. You had a chance at family. At love. At something real. And you threw it away. Twice. You don't get to claim me now. You don't get to pretend this is some tearful reunion. I'm not here for you. I'm here for her. For my mother. For every person this company hurt while you looked the other way. What do you want from me? Leon asked, his voice breaking. Confession. Apology. What will make this right? Nothing makes this right, Laura said. But the truth needed to be told. The world needed to know what kind of man you really are. What kind of company you built. And now they do. Leon looked at her with devastated eyes. You're my daughter. I was, Laura replied, echoing the words from that first confrontation. Once. Before you chose money over my mother. Before you signed the paper that killed her. Before you pretended we never existed. I never meant to hurt her, Leon said desperately. I loved her. I did. But you didn't love her enough, Laura finished. And that's what destroyed everything. The room was silent except for the sound of Leon crying. Not dignified tears. Real, broken sobbing. The sound of a man watching everything he'd built crumble and realizing too late what it cost. Caleb stood slightly behind Laura, his hand on her shoulder. Supporting her. Being what Leon never was. A partner who stayed. Finally, Leon looked up. What happens now? Federal investigators will be here by this afternoon, Caleb said. The board is meeting tomorrow morning to discuss your removal. Shareholders are demanding answers. The media won't stop until they've dissected every decision you've made for 2 decades. And Laura and I will testify to everything we found. Will you fight this? Laura asked. Will you try to bury this the way you buried my mother? Leon looked at her for a long moment. At his daughter who had his eyes. Who had Liana's fire. Who had grown into exactly the kind of strong, intelligent, fierce woman he'd fallen in love with once. Who was dismantling his life with the same determination he'd used to build his empire. And he realized something. This girl. This young woman who hated him. She was the only real thing he'd created that mattered. No, he said quietly. I won't fight it. Let the truth stand. Laura hadn't expected that. Hadn't prepared for him to accept defeat so completely. Why? Because you're right, Leon said simply. About all of it. I was weak. I chose wrong. And people died because of my choices. Your mother died. And I have to live with that. But I won't make it worse by hiding anymore. If this is my punishment, I'll take it. This isn't about punishing you, Laura said, her voice softer now despite herself. It's about accountability. About making sure this company can't keep hurting people. About giving my mother's death meaning. She would be so proud of you, Leon whispered. Liana. She would be proud of the woman you've become. Don't, Laura said sharply. Don't talk about her like you knew her. Like you had any part in raising me. She raised me alone. She sacrificed everything so I could have opportunities. She died protecting me from knowing how badly you betrayed us. You don't get to claim her pride. You're right, Leon agreed. I don't. But I am proud of you. Even though I have no right to be. Even though you hate me. Even though I failed you in every possible way. I'm proud that my daughter is brave enough to destroy me when I deserved it. Laura felt tears threaten but refused to let them fall. I'm not doing this for your approval. I know, Leon said. You're doing it because it's right. The way Liana would have. You're more her than you are me. Thank God for that. There was a long pause. Everything that needed to be said had been said. The confession. The truth. The acknowledgement. There was nothing left but consequences. Laura turned to leave, Caleb following. But at the door, she stopped. Looked back. For what it's worth, she said quietly. My mother told me once that you were a complicated person. That you were good once. I didn't believe her. But seeing you now, broken and honest for maybe the first time in decades, I wonder if she was right. If the man she loved is buried somewhere under the CEO. If you could have been different if you'd been braver. Leon looked at her with desperate hope. Can you ever forgive me? Laura considered the question. Really considered it. I don't know. Maybe someday. But not today. Not while I'm still grieving her. Not while I'm still angry. Maybe years from now, when the wounds aren't so fresh. Maybe then we can talk again. As strangers trying to understand each other. But not as father and daughter. I don't think we'll ever have that. That's more than I deserve, Leon said. Yes, Laura agreed. It is. They left. Walked out of his office. Through the executive suite. Into an elevator that took them down and away from the empire that was crumbling even as they descended. When they stepped into the lobby, cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But Laura and Caleb pushed through, hand in hand, and walked out into the sunlight. How do you feel? Caleb asked once they were clear of the chaos. Laura thought about it. Empty. Sad. Relieved. Scared. Angry. I don't know. All of it at once. That's normal, Caleb said. You just faced your father and destroyed his life's work. There's no handbook for that. Did I do the right thing? Laura asked suddenly, vulnerability showing through her armor. He seemed so broken. So genuinely destroyed. What if I just created more pain instead of justice? Caleb stopped walking. Turned to face her. You did the right thing. Not because it hurt him. But because it will save others. Every person who would have been hurt by Hartwell Global's negligence in the future. Every family who would have lost someone the way you lost your mother. You protected them. That's what matters. I wish she could see this, Laura said softly. I wish she could know that her death meant something. That I fought for her. She knows, Caleb said with certainty. Wherever she is, she knows. And she's proud. They walked to a park nearby. Sat on a bench. And for the first time in months, maybe years, Laura let herself just breathe. The mission was over. The truth was out. Her mother's story would never be forgotten. And she was still standing. Damaged but whole. Angry but relieved. Lost but found. What happens now? She asked. Now we deal with the fallout, Caleb said. We'll probably be fired. Might face legal challenges. The company will try to discredit us. The media will dissect our lives. It's going to be hard. Worth it though, Laura said. Completely worth it, Caleb agreed. And after all that, she asked. After the investigations and trials and media circus. What then? Caleb took her hand. Then we figure out who we are when we're not defined by this fight. We build lives that are about more than revenge and justice. We find out if this thing between us can survive outside of crisis mode. You think it can? Laura asked. I hope so, he said honestly. Because I'm in love with you. Have been for months. And I'd like to see where this goes when we're not working 18-hour days trying to take down a pharmaceutical giant. Laura's breath caught. You love me. Yes, Caleb said simply. I love you. Your fierce heart. Your brilliant mind. Your determination. Your pain. All of it. I love you, Laura Clarke. She kissed him then. Right there in the park with the world crashing down around them. Because love was the thing her mother had taught her mattered most. Love had broken Liana. But love had also given her Laura. Had given her purpose. Had given her life meaning even in the midst of suffering. And maybe, just maybe, love could be what put Laura back together now that vengeance had hollowed her out. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. And I'm terrified of that. Of losing someone else I love. Of this not being real. Of waking up and finding out I'm still alone. You're not alone, Caleb promised. Not anymore. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Okay. Okay, Laura agreed. They sat in that park for hours. Talking about the future. About possibilities. About dreams that weren't centered on destruction but on building something new. They talked about moving away from the city. Starting their own consulting firm focused on corporate ethics. Maybe teaching. Maybe advocacy work. Maybe just living quiet lives far from the chaos they'd created. By evening, the news was everywhere. Leon Hartwell had announced his resignation as CEO of Hartwell Global effective immediately. The board had accepted. Federal investigators had seized company records. Criminal charges were being discussed. Stock prices had plummeted. Lawsuits were being filed. And at the center of it all was the story of Laura Clarke Hartwell. The daughter who came back to expose her father. The whistleblower who brought down a billion-dollar empire. The girl who turned grief into justice. Laura's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. It was from Leon. Just 2 words, thank you. She stared at those words for a long time. Thank you. For what? For destroying him. For exposing his failures. For forcing him to face what he'd done. Or for being the daughter he never knew he needed. The daughter who was strong enough to hold him accountable. She didn't respond. Didn't know how to respond. Maybe someday she'd understand what he meant. But not today. 6 months later, the investigations were complete. Federal charges had been filed against 3 Hartwell Global executives, though Leon himself avoided criminal prosecution in exchange for cooperating fully with investigators. He'd testified against his own company. Provided documents. Helped build cases. And in doing so, he'd dismantled everything he'd spent 30 years creating. The company restructured. New leadership. New policies. A compensation fund for victims of the prenatal medication. Public apologies. Real reforms. It would never erase the past. But it was something. It was acknowledgement that lives had been lost and survivors deserved more than settlements. They deserved truth. Laura and Caleb had indeed been fired. They'd faced their own legal challenges from the company's lawyers who tried to claim they'd stolen proprietary information. But with the federal investigation backing their evidence, those charges never stuck. They'd become famous. Or infamous, depending on who you asked. Whistleblowers. Heroes. Traitors. Troublemakers. The labels didn't matter. What mattered was that they'd told the truth and survived it. They'd moved to a smaller city. Started a nonprofit focused on corporate accountability and patient advocacy. It was hard work. Underfunded. Exhausting. But meaningful. They helped other whistleblowers navigate the process. Connected victims' families with lawyers. Pushed for stronger regulations. And slowly, carefully, they built lives that weren't defined by trauma or vengeance. Laura went to therapy. Real therapy with a counselor who specialized in grief and complex trauma. She worked through her anger at Leon. Her grief for her mother. Her guilt over the years she'd spent planning revenge instead of living. It was painful. Messy. But necessary. Because she realized she didn't want to be angry forever. Didn't want her mother's death to be the only thing that defined her. She started playing piano again. Something she'd abandoned after her mother died because it hurt too much. But now she found comfort in it. In the melodies her mother had taught her. In the way music could express things words couldn't. She played for herself. For Caleb. For her mother's memory. And it felt like healing. One evening, almost a year after the exposé, Laura received a letter. Real mail, handwritten, postmarked from a rehabilitation center. She recognized the handwriting from documents she'd studied obsessively. It was from Leon. Dear Laura. I don't know if you'll read this. Don't know if you want to hear from me. But I needed to write it anyway. I'm in therapy. Real therapy, not just court-mandated sessions. I'm working through why I made the choices I made. Why I valued my father's approval over my own happiness. Why I let fear control every decision. Why I hurt the people I loved most. I can't undo any of it. Can't bring your mother back. Can't erase the pain I caused you. Can't fix the damage my company did to thousands of lives. But I'm trying to understand it. So maybe I can be different. So maybe the years I have left can mean something beyond destruction. I want you to know that I think about you every day. About the daughter I never knew. About the amazing woman you've become despite having a coward for a father. About how you did what I never had the courage to do, chose what was right even when it cost you everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for a relationship. I don't deserve either of those things. I just wanted you to know that you changed me. Not just by exposing me. But by showing me what real strength looks like. What real love looks like. The love your mother had for you. The love you had for her. The love that drove you to fight when it would have been easier to walk away. I hope you're happy. I hope you found peace. I hope you're playing piano again, because Liana always said you were gifted. I hope you've built a life that honors her memory without being consumed by it. And if someday, years from now, you ever want to talk, as two broken people trying to make sense of impossible situations, I'll be here. But if you don't, I understand. Either way, know that I'm proud of you. Even though I have no right to that pride. Even though I failed you in every way that matters. I'm proud that my daughter is someone who fights for truth. Who protects the vulnerable. Who turns pain into purpose. Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. And though I never knew you, though I have no claim to you, I love you too. In the complicated, insufficient, regret-filled way of a man who realized too late what actually matters. With love and sorrow, Leon. Laura read the letter 3 times. Then she set it aside and cried. Not angry tears. Not bitter tears. Just sad, complicated tears for a father she'd never have. For a relationship that died before it could begin. For the man her mother loved who got buried under ambition and fear. For the possibility of forgiveness that felt impossible but maybe, someday, might not be. She showed the letter to Caleb that night. He read it carefully, then looked at her. How do you feel? I don't know, Laura admitted. He sounds genuine. But he sounded genuine when he told my mother he loved her too. And then he left. How do I trust that this is real? That he's actually changing and not just saying what he thinks I want to hear? I don't think you can know, Caleb said honestly. Time is the only thing that proves change is real. But you get to decide if you want to give him that time. If you want to open that door even a crack. Or if you want to close it permanently. Either choice is valid. What would you do? Laura asked. I'd wait, Caleb said thoughtfully. I'd take time to heal more. To build my life into something stable and good. And then, maybe a year or two from now, if I was curious, if I felt strong enough, I might reach out. Not to give him absolution. Not to pretend the past didn't happen. But to see if understanding is possible. If connection is possible. Even if it's not a traditional father-daughter relationship. Laura nodded slowly. That makes sense. But that's me, Caleb added. You get to make your own choice. And I'll support whatever you decide. Laura folded the letter carefully and put it in a drawer. Not thrown away. Not responded to. Just kept. For someday. For when she was ready. Or maybe never. The choice was hers now. And that power, after years of powerlessness, felt like its own kind of justice. 2 years after the exposé, Laura sat at a piano in a small venue. A benefit concert for their nonprofit. She'd been asked to perform, and for the first time since her mother died, she'd said yes. Caleb sat in the front row, smiling encouragingly. The room was full of people who'd been helped by their work. Whistleblowers and victims' families and advocates and activists. Laura's fingers hovered over the keys. She thought about her mother. About Liana playing at that gala where she met Leon. About how one moment, one choice to share her music, had led to everything. To love and heartbreak and Laura herself. To a chain of events that ended with this moment. With a daughter who'd survived. Who'd fought. Who'd won in ways that mattered. She started playing. Not Chopin or Rachmaninoff. Something original. Something she'd composed in therapy when words weren't enough. It was sad and beautiful and hopeful all at once. It was her mother's love and her father's failure and her own resilience. It was grief transformed into art. Pain transformed into purpose. Anger transformed into something that might, someday, become peace. When the piece ended, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. Standing ovation. Not because the music was technically perfect. But because everyone in that room understood what it meant to survive something devastating. To take broken pieces and build something new. To refuse to let tragedy have the final word. After the concert, Laura and Caleb walked home through the quiet streets. Their apartment was small but filled with warmth. Plants on every surface, just like her mother's place. Books stacked everywhere. A keyboard in the corner. Photos of Liana scattered throughout, keeping her memory alive. It wasn't the life Laura had imagined as a child. But it was real. It was hers. And it was enough. I'm thinking about writing him back, she said suddenly. Caleb looked at her. Leon? Yeah, Laura confirmed. Not to forgive him. Not to play happy family. But to tell him I heard him. To acknowledge that he's trying. To maybe, possibly, leave the door open for something. I don't know what. But something. What would you say? Caleb asked. Laura thought about it. That I'm still angry. That I'll probably always carry some of that anger. That he destroyed my mother and I can't just let that go. But also that I'm trying to build a life that's about more than pain. That I'm trying to honor my mother by being happy, not just by being angry. And that maybe, if he keeps doing the work, if he proves over years that he's actually changed, we could have a conversation. Not as father and daughter, but as two people connected by tragedy trying to understand each other. That sounds healthy, Caleb said. Honest but not closed off. Protective but not bitter. I learned from the best, Laura said, squeezing his hand. My mother taught me to be fierce. You taught me I could be fierce and still open my heart. That they weren't mutually exclusive. You taught yourself that, Caleb corrected gently. I just reminded you it was possible. They reached their building. Climbed the stairs to their apartment. Made tea and sat on their worn couch, just like Liana and Leon had done in another lifetime. But this time, the story was different. This time, the man stayed. This time, love won. Not in a fairy tale way. Not perfectly or easily. But in the real, messy, complicated way that actually matters. Do you think she'd be proud? Laura asked, looking at a photo of her mother on the bookshelf. Of what I did. How I did it. Who I've become. I know she would, Caleb said with certainty. You fought for her. You made sure her death mattered. You turned your pain into purpose. And you did it without losing yourself. Without becoming bitter or cruel or destroyed. That takes incredible strength. The kind of strength she had. The kind she passed on to you. Laura smiled through tears. I miss her every day. I know, Caleb said, pulling her close. But she's still with you. In your music. In your fierce heart. In the way you fight for people who can't fight for themselves. She's there. And he was right. Liana was there. In every note Laura played. In every victim she helped. In every moment she chose compassion over cruelty. In the life she was building brick by brick from the ruins of her past. Her mother's love hadn't died with her. It had transformed. Become the foundation for everything Laura would build in the years ahead. 3 years after the exposé, Laura finally wrote back to Leon. It was a short letter. Not warm, but not cruel. She told him she was doing well. That she was building a meaningful life. That she appreciated his acknowledgement of the harm he caused. And that if he was still working on himself in another year, if he was still genuine, she might be willing to meet for coffee. Just coffee. No expectations. No promises. Just two people trying to find understanding in the wreckage of choices that couldn't be undone. She mailed it and felt lighter. Not because she'd forgiven him. But because she'd released some of the weight. Had chosen to believe that people could change, even if they could never fully repair what they'd broken. That healing didn't require forgetting. That moving forward didn't mean leaving her mother behind. It just meant refusing to let pain be the only thing that defined her story. Leon wrote back immediately. A careful, grateful letter that didn't push for more than she'd offered. That acknowledged he understood her conditions. That agreed coffee in a year, maybe, if she still wanted to, would be more than he deserved. That he'd keep working. Keep trying. Keep becoming someone who might deserve a second chance at being a father, even in the smallest, most limited way. A year later, they met. At a quiet coffee shop in a city neither of them lived in anymore. Neutral ground. Laura brought Caleb, who sat at a nearby table giving her space but staying close enough if she needed him. Leon came alone, looking older and humbler and more human than he ever had in the boardroom. They talked for 2 hours. About safe things at first. Then harder things. Leon told her about his therapy, about the work he was doing to understand his failures. About starting a foundation to help victims of corporate negligence. About liquidating most of his assets to fund it. About trying to live differently than he had for 50 years. Laura told him about her work. About her mother's piano that she'd kept all these years. About falling in love with Caleb. About learning to be happy despite everything. About choosing to honor Liana by living fully instead of just surviving. They didn't hug when they said goodbye. Didn't promise to meet again soon. But they exchanged numbers. And there was an understanding, fragile and new, that this was a beginning. Not of a traditional father-daughter relationship. They'd never have that. Too much had been lost. But maybe of something else. Of mutual respect. Of honest dialogue. Of two people trying to coexist with a painful past. 5 years after the exposé, Laura married Caleb. It was a small ceremony. Just close friends and the families they'd chosen. Leon wasn't invited. But he sent a gift. A donation to their nonprofit in Liana's name. And a note that said simply, "She would be so happy to see you so happy. Congratulations." Laura cried when she read it. Not sad tears. Just overwhelmed tears. Because she was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. She'd done what her mother never could. She'd survived heartbreak and turned it into purpose. She'd fallen in love with someone who stayed. She'd built a life that mattered. And she'd found a way to carry her mother's memory forward without being crushed by it. On her wedding day, she wore a silver bracelet her mother had given her. Played a piece Liana had taught her. Kept her mother's photo on the altar. Because Liana was part of this joy. Part of this moment. Part of everything good Laura had become. Leon had given her DNA. But Liana had given her everything that actually mattered. Love. Strength. The ability to fight. The wisdom to heal. The courage to hope. And as Laura stood beside Caleb, promising to love him in all the ways her mother had loved her, fiercely and completely and without reservation, she felt Liana there. Felt her pride. Her joy. Her relief that her daughter had made it through the darkness and found light on the other side. The story didn't have a perfect ending. Because life doesn't offer those. Leon would always be the father who failed her. The man who let her mother die. The coward who chose wrong when it mattered most. That truth would never change. But truth could coexist with grace. With the possibility that people could grow. That regret could be genuine. That redemption wasn't about erasing the past but about building a different future. Laura and Leon never became close. But over the years, they developed something resembling cautious respect. They met occasionally. Talked carefully. Shared updates about their lives without pretending to be something they weren't. He met Caleb. Attended the opening of a community center their nonprofit built. Donated regularly and quietly to their work. He was never dad. Would never be dad. But he stopped being just the villain. Became instead a complicated person who made terrible choices and spent the rest of his life trying to make different ones. And for Laura, that was enough. Not forgiveness exactly. But acknowledgement. Understanding. The recognition that humans are messy and flawed and capable of both enormous harm and genuine growth. That her mother had been right when she said people were complicated. That holding space for that complexity didn't mean excusing harm. It just meant refusing to let hate consume her the way loss had almost consumed Liana. She was Laura Clarke Hartwell. Daughter of a woman who loved her fiercely. Daughter of a man who failed her completely. Wife to someone who chose her daily. Founder of an organization that protected others from the kind of negligence that destroyed her family. Pianist. Advocate. Survivor. Fighter. And most importantly, someone who'd learned that justice and joy could coexist. That you could demand accountability and still choose happiness. That the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was building a life so meaningful, so full, so rich with purpose that the people who hurt you became footnotes instead of the whole story. Her mother had taught her that. Not with words. But with example. With the way she'd loved Laura completely despite her own heartbreak. With the way she'd found joy in small things even while dying. With the strength she'd shown until her very last breath. Liana Clarke had turned pain into purpose first. Had shown her daughter how to survive. And now Laura was doing the same. Living the life her mother never got to live. Finding the happiness her mother never got to find. Loving and being loved in ways that healed wounds that had seemed permanent. This was her mother's legacy. Not the tragedy. Not the abandonment. Not the injustice. But this. A daughter who fought. Who won. Who built something beautiful from something broken. Who turned a story that began with betrayal into one that ended with hope. Who proved that love, real love, the kind that shows up and stays and fights, was always stronger than fear. Always stronger than greed. Always stronger than the cowardice that tried to bury it. And somewhere, in whatever came after, Liana Clarke was watching her daughter dance at her wedding, laughing with her husband, making a difference in countless lives, and thinking, yes. This is exactly what I wanted for you. Not perfection. Not an easy life. But a meaningful one. A happy one. A life where you know, deep in your soul, that you are loved. That you matter. That your existence changed the world for the better. Because that's exactly what Laura had done. She'd changed the world. Not by becoming like her father. Not by letting pain define her. But by choosing every single day to be more like her mother. To love fiercely. To fight courageously. To believe that tomorrow could be better than today. To prove that the daughters of broken men and extraordinary women could rise above every obstacle and become exactly who they were always meant to be. Heroes. Survivors. Warriors. Women who turned tears into triumph. Who transformed heartbreak into hope. Who showed the world that the most powerful thing you could do with pain wasn't to let it destroy you. It was to let it drive you toward justice, toward truth, toward a future where others wouldn't have to suffer the way you had suffered. That was Laura's story. And it was still being written. Would be written for decades to come. Every person she helped. Every policy she changed. Every victim she validated. Every time she sat at a piano and played her mother's music. Every moment she chose love over hate, healing over bitterness, purpose over despair. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was what it meant to be the daughter Liana Clarke raised. The daughter Leon Hartwell never knew he needed. The woman who proved that you could be abandoned by a billionaire CEO, lose everything that mattered, face impossible odds, and still win. Not because victory was easy. But because some fights are worth having. Some truths are worth telling. And some loves are worth honoring, even long after they're gone. This was how Laura Clarke Hartwell honored her mother. Not just by destroying the empire that killed her. But by building something better in its place. By living so fully, loving so completely, fighting so fiercely that Liana's death became a catalyst instead of just a tragedy. By making sure that every person who heard their story knew one simple truth: love wins. Not always immediately. Not always obviously. But eventually, inevitably, profoundly. Love wins. And in the end, that was the only legacy that mattered. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, this is Mr. Ellington Love Lines, reminding you that your story isn't over yet. The best chapters might still be unwritten. And sometimes, the ending you never saw coming is exactly the one you always needed. If this story moved you, share with someone who believes in second chances. That's how love multiplies. Subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you, broken things can still bloom. Leave a comment with one lesson you've taken from the story. Your reflection might inspire our next episode.